Hey there guys, Spets here, back again with another patch rundown, this time for patch 5.12. Ryze has been releasing quite a few patches in the past few weeks. I'm really surprised, but there's some exciting changes, and I think some really important balance changes to AP champions and some other things that I think you guys will like. So we'll get right into it. The first change is a set of visual effect updates. You guys can take a look at these in game, or I'm sure there's some videos online. Some people like them, some people don't. I think the ones in Galio are kind of nice overall, but take a look at those online. I won't talk about them too much. There have been some recoding, some coding fixes that people have been asking for some time. I don't know if you guys have had examples of this in your games, but there are videos online of like projectiles that have been completely missing even though they're clearly going through someone. I'll actually link one of Gosu using an Ashe arrow and it going right through someone. It's kind of silly how bad it's gotten, but hopefully they're fixing it. They're talking about how line skill shots, so they're making a differentiation between line skill shots, which are things like Ezreal Q, W, R, like they explain right here, Ashe arrow, things like that, and things like Syndra stun, her E, that are actually still coded as minions. That's the joke that people make, but that is apparently the truth still. So they're cleaning a lot of stuff up. They're making this a slow transition so they make sure it doesn't completely break the game. I think that's a smart idea, but they're cleaning things up. Always a fan of this. Let's see. So it's just like some details. You guys can take a look at this yourself, but basically cleaning up the code, which I'm always a fan of. They really need to work on that instead of like, I'm okay with new champions, but this kind of stuff is really important because this is what is going to make or break your game. So Riot's making some changes to how recall works, mainly in the last split seconds of the recall animation. You guys should know this, but if you don't, you can not stop someone after a certain point when they're recalling. That's like within the last split seconds. Here they're talking about how it can range between 0 to 0.25 seconds. And I never like when there's this kind of like a range with certain things. You want to have things be consistent and predictable. So now they're making it 0.1 at all times. Within that last 0.1 seconds, if you get hit, you won't be stopped. So I think I like this. They normalize it, make everything consistent. Ashe got a nerf. I think this is not too big of a nerf. I don't think she needed the nerf, but it's okay in making her a little more in line with other AD carries. So now you can only apply or gain 1 stack of your passive, or the Ranger's focus passive, that allows you to create that flurry attack, that increased AD ratios on your auto attacks. You can get only 1 off of Enchanted Crystal Arrow, Volley, and auto attacks. So you can't just, you would often be able to just volley a group of enemies and instantly get 5 stacks, or like volley, get hit minions, and you'll get stacks very quickly. So this makes it a little harder, it takes a little bit more time, but she will still have that increased damage when she does activate it. Braum has been getting a few buffs. I think he got a buff in the last patch to his Q damage, but I'm not 100% sure. I have to go back and check. But they buffed it slightly more. I think they did, both in damage and mana cost. So I think Braum is a little better. I still think he has a lot of weaknesses. He doesn't really provide too much in the lane. I feel he's like more of a defensive support unless you can have an AD carry. Like Lucian was really good with Braum because he was able to proc his passive very quickly and stun the target. Braum can be very aggressive if he has an AD carry who can follow up and like proc those 4 stacks of his passive to stun them and get that extra damage. But it's very tough. I think he'll be in a better spot. Maybe people start to notice him again. He was really popular back when Yasuo was popular, but now that Yasuo is kind of less popular, we'll see. I think it just depends on how people will use him in competitive. I think in solo queue he isn't the greatest, but in competitive he has a lot of strength, is what I was trying to say. So I think he's decent. He's very good defensively, very strong. His shield is great. His W, which gives you armor and magic resist, is really good, but I think his shield is actually what makes him probably one of the strongest supports. At least that's what makes him strong. I don't think he's the strongest support. I still think Thresh is by and far the best support around. So there have been quite a few changes to Ekko. They are increasing, let's just go through them real quick. They are increasing his mana per level growth stat by 10. Don't really understand. I would have to, I guess, check other champions' growth stat for mana, but not a big deal, 10 at each level. Base attack speed has been reduced, while his growth stat for attack speed has been increased. So he's gonna have he's not gonna be able to proc his 3 bolts of his passive as easily early on, but it will be compensated as the game goes on. So I would have to look and just check to see when this evens out, but it's just, in short, early on he can't proc it as easily. Later on it'll be a little easier. So they're just trying to make his early game weaker. Here as well, this makes his early game, but just overall his damage weaker throughout the game through his passive. So he'll still have that insane utility from the movement speed that he gains and the slow that he gives to, or that the movement speed sap that he gets from his passive, but he gets quite a reduction in damage. You guys can take a look. Early on it's not that big of a deal, it's just like 10 or like 17 here, 27 here, but it goes up, it scales up. So you lose 41 damage at level 18. That's a sizable chunk if you really think about it. So he'll be weaker in that sense. His ability power ratio for his Q has been reduced, which kind of confuses me because they wanted to reduce his base damages, but they also explained how they want to make it so his damage is less reliable. So the first proc of his Q is the easier one to hit most often. The second one, they have time to like step to the side often. So I guess they're just doing that, making him a little harder to use. Not 100% sure. So the last change to Ekko is to his ultimate, and I think this is a good change. I'm going to compare him to another hero in Dota by the name of Weaver. Very similar ultimates. They go back in time, so to speak. But with Weaver, you get all of his mana and HP that he had from, I think it's 4 or 5 seconds ago, while he gets only a certain amount of his health back for Ekko. So he's weaker, but obviously it's a completely different game, completely different context. But what is really important is that Weaver's mana, he has a mana cost on his ultimate until the last level. So there was like this counterplay where if you have mana like stealing champions or draining champions, or heroes, sorry, because for Dota it's different, you can stop Weaver and like kill him much more easily. He's very elusive, but if he doesn't have mana, he can't ult. So same thing with this. So they give more counterplay. If he doesn't have mana, he is very vulnerable. So I think that's perfectly fine. So he needs to manage his mana, and that actually makes sense in the context that they give him more mana as time goes on. Damage radius slightly lowered, not completely sure. It's a pretty big radius if you think about it, but not a big deal overall. So this is probably the biggest change that I'm interested in, along with the defensive mastery changes, so we'll go right through it. Okay, so the first change is W Skittering Frenzy, the healing portion when you activate it. It no longer heals you off your basic attacks and spiraling basic attacks. They move that over to her spider form. So I'm not 100% sure about the exact numbers because they didn't state the numbers of this. So I can't compare it to what it was here, but I'll assume it's very similar to what it is here. I'm not 100% sure though. So you guys can tell me in the comments or something along those lines. But they moved it to the ultimate. And what is good about this is that you do not have to activate, so you can constantly have that healing in the jungle instead of having to activate and use mana for that. So that's good. I'm not 100% sure if it's a nerf though, so you guys tell me. But this is probably the biggest change and what will make, I think, Elise viable if Runeglaive starts catching on, because I think Runeglaive is quite a good item in the jungle and overall just in damage. This gives Elise quite a lot of damage, so I think the way to go will be Q max and E max immediately after. I think that will be the way to go for maximum damage and utility, because your E is your repel and your cocoon, so keep that in mind. So we'll go, so look at these numbers, 40% up to 100% at level 5. So let's go to the numbers. This will increase your damage only in spider form. That is what the tooltip states. So you will have extra damage on this. 220 base damage will go up to 440 on the person you repel to. Very damn good in my opinion. It will also increase just your basic attack damage, I'm guessing. And it will also increase the damage from your spiderlings and increase damage from spider form that you get on your auto attack. So things like that all will be increased. I think this will be insane though. It will also increase the percentage damage that you get from what is it? Missing health. There we go. So overall, this will be a huge damage buff to Elise. One that people will, I think, underestimate at first, but it will catch on that I think she'll be quite good. So I think this is a very big buff. Okay, next change is to Galio. His ultimate has been buffed significantly, in my opinion. So what they did is they nerfed the base damages. You guys see this, 20 at level 1, 30 at level 2, and 40 at level 3, or rank 3, sorry. And they increased how much damage you gain from each hit from an enemy. So you just gain twice as much percentage increase in damage, and the cap is also higher. It takes the same amount of time to reach that cap though, so it only takes 8 hits, which is actually quite a lot if you think about it, but again, the cap is higher, and you can get a maximum of 720 compared to 616 before. The AP ratio is higher, everything else about it is higher. So even though Galio's ultimate is quite hard to land the full duration on as is, especially if you have like champions like Alistar or like Udyr with Bear Stance, it's still very hard to land a full duration ultimate. But this makes it much more rewarding if you do. So I think this is good. I think Galio is quite good, especially since they changed his ultimate to be irreducible, or I don't know what the word is. I think irreducible, not unreducible, by tenacity. So if you have Merc Treads, if you're Aurelia, it doesn't matter. It's full duration. Very good in my opinion. I think Galio might be picked up if teams are against like a double AP composition. It isn't as popular today, but if you see a double AP composition, I think Galio is a great option in the mid lane. Theens is better. Everything has been buffed to give Galio a chance to succeed, and I think he'll be quite strong. Gragas has some nerfs to his base health regen and health regen growth stats. So in general, health regen is lower, but overall, I don't think that's what makes Gragas strong. He has a lot of CC, good base damage, and a lot of sustain from his passive, so he doesn't really need this as much as other champions. So this is not a big deal. It does hurt him, but still, it's not a big deal. They also nerfed the slow duration on his Q, so immediately after you send out your Q, if you explode it immediately, it used to be 2 seconds no matter what. If you let it charge, it didn't matter, it'd still be 2 seconds. Now they changed it to be 1.3 if you don't wait for it to charge up. So this kind of puts it more in line with how his damage ramps up. Also the slow duration ramps up over time. So same thing. I guess they just don't want Gragas to, like, he can like disengage with his ultimate and his Q. Like you can kite back and use your Q to slow people in quite a large AoE. So in that sense, he was very strong in so many different ways. And this is a good change. Brings the possibility of other junglers back in, but I think at least the way I used to play Gragas before Cinderhulk came around was going AP, at least starting off. And this was back when, what was it? The Wraith item, the jungle Wraith item, I don't know what the name, Spectral Wraith was around. You used to get a lot of mana sustain and health sustain just from that item. And you really didn't need any more AP items. You could go more AP, but you can go tank after that and you'd be very effective. It was just a way to sustain. But the new Runeglaive allows him to do that again. And I think he'll be able to be played with Cinderhulk or Runeglaive. Just depends on how much CC, or what am I saying, how much tank you need on your team, how much durability. If you have another tank in the top lane, you can go maybe Runeglaive and go more tank items after that, or go more AP. It just all depends. I think he will be pretty good with that item, but we'll talk about that later. Jarvan got some buffs to his cooldown on Demacian Standard. This allows him to use it more often to get knockups. So I think, I'm not 100% sure, but this is part of the reason Jarvan was really good back when he was first released. He had a lot going for him, let's be honest. He has he had a lot of base damage. He could just build, I don't know if you guys were around this long ago, but he could build like just full gold items. He could build Philosopher's Stone, 3 hearts of gold, and he'd be set. He would get so much armor from Demacian Standard, but everything has been nerfed, but they're bringing back his cooldown on levels of Demacian Standard. So you can maybe get 2 flag combos in a row if you have a decent amount of cooldown reduction. So I think this is really good for him. Not a big deal. They also changed it so Demacian Standard no longer confuses the pathing of jungle monsters, so I guess this would make his jungling a little easier. Not 100% sure. I never saw that before, but interesting. Maybe it's just coded as a minion, they would walk around and he could kite it around them. So interesting, didn't know about that, but this will make him a little stronger in positioning his flag combo more often during a team fight. Jax got quite a significant buff to his ultimate, and as is, it was already strong, so you guys gotta, here, I'll show you guys just to be sure. Keep in mind that Jax has both a base on this, and he has a good ratio for AD and AP. So keep that in mind. He naturally builds Triforce, it's just a great item on him. So that adds to his armor and magic resist. So if this was just the only thing that he got from his ultimate, it would be already really strong. Since it got buffed by 20 at level 3, I think it's like 15 at level 2 or rank 2, and 10 at rank 1. You guys can take a look. Yep. And this is just such a huge buff in general. I think Jax will be brought back. I know I've seen him, I don't know who it was. I don't know if it was Europe or China. Someone played Jax and they did quite well because he was allowed to farm up, just stayed in lane as long as possible. I know lane swaps do hurt him quite a lot, but I think he is still definitely viable in solo queue, so don't get me wrong. There's so many things that are viable in solo queue, but Jax is just in general a really good split pushing threat duelist. He just gets really farmed, and then once he gets to a point, he can team fight and he can absolutely wreck people because he gets so tanky with his E, Counter-Strike, and his ultimate Grandmaster Might, and this makes it even more dangerous. He had base damage or base like stat nerfs, like his health got nerfed before. A lot of stuff got nerfed about him, but he was still very strong regardless of those changes. Now he's even stronger. I think he's going to be very good in solo queue, maybe even played in competitive if the team requires like a split pushing threat. And as we go down, we'll talk about some other things that might actually help split pushers. Lux got some changes to her Prismatic Barrier W shield and E Lucent Singularity. So the radius of this is higher. I don't know if this increases the detonation range as well, the radius, but the radius of the slow is increased. It can also be detonated immediately when it lands, so very good change for Lux. Just makes her more responsive. Same thing with her shield. She immediately gets the shield when it's casted instead of waiting for the animation. Very nice, just much quicker. Prevents her from being bursted as easily. Just a lot of things that make her more usable, cleaner in general. It also now has a neat little swirl or neat light swirl to indicate when the ability is ready to be detonated. So just to indicate, like, just be more clear when you can detonate it. I'm sure it's just gonna pop up immediately since they changed it to be recasted on flight. This will not change Lux's viability. I still don't think she's very good. So just in general, Lux requires a lot of items to be successful, and it takes a while for her to ramp up. Just in general, I don't like her as a champion. She does have some good CC and kiting abilities, but again, she's really immobile. Why would you pick her over someone like Xerath? Why would you pick her over someone like Ziggs? I mean, if you get a good binding, yes, she's very good and she can pop someone immediately, but with the tank line in front most of the time, I don't think she's the greatest. Like Ziggs, he can reach the back line with his bombs very often. Xerath is very good at it, especially with his ultimate and his Q. He can reach the back line, things like that. She's just not as good as the other alternatives. So, and her mana costs are ridiculous. Like I said, mana cost on E is 130 at max rank, and that's what you usually max. That's insane. So yeah, she just needs a lot of items, not as useful as other alternatives. Malphite got a slight change to the way his W works. So it looks like they nerfed the base damage, which I think is okay. I don't know if people were maxing W. Trying to think. But they also gave him a increase in the total armor ratio. So Malphite can get upwards of 400 armor fairly easily compared to other champions. So keep that in mind. You get 40 extra damage on this. Pretty damn good. So overall, this actually makes him better for how he itemizes. He does get lower AP ratio on it and lower base damage, but I think it will be a net increase in damage with how he itemizes. So I think this is great. Also increase the splash area. I think Malphite's quite good in top lane scenario. Jungle, he's decent, but if let's say they see you pick jungle Malphite early, or if they have an aggressive jungler themselves before you even pick, it doesn't really matter. They can just take advantage of you pre-6. At 6, Malphite's quite good, but before that, he doesn't really offer anything to gank, so he is a little slow, and that's about it. But I think he's very good in the top lane. We'll see, though. Solo queue viable, of course. Malphite has almost always been solo queue viable. Very strong ultimate. This will just give him a little extra damage, and especially since he itemizes armor. So, like, it's like his priority to itemize armor. Okay, so there have been a few changes to Ryze. We'll go through them real quick. So I'm not 100% sure what this means, but this is how I'm interpreting it, his general change. So let's say you're running away from a champion or running towards a champion. What I think this means is that if you, let's say, use a rune prison and then you don't use an ability immediately after for the spell animation, it will tell you to keep moving in the direction that you wanted to move originally without having to issue the command again. So without right-clicking again. So that's actually really nice. Makes it a little easier to use his combos while kiting, while people call it orb walking, but that's not really what an orb walk is. While kiting and moving around. And it just makes it smoother. I think this is a good change overall. It will make it a little easier for people who are new to Ryze. But overall, it doesn't really change people who are really good at Ryze. They do this regardless of whether or not it happens on its own, so it's not a big deal. These are the big changes, though. So let's go through these two, and I'll explain this afterwards. So the passive Arcane Mastery was why he was kind of seen as really OP within the last couple weeks. His passive duration got increased to, I think it was from 4 to 6, and that might not seem like a big change, but along with how people were using it, they just waited for his passive to come up, and they would just W, have max W basically, and then they would Q because it's really easy to hit someone that isn't moving, and they would just constantly use their W because it would go off cooldown immediately after because of how his passive works. Now you can't do that. You only have 2.5 second window to do that. Very weak unless you max Q, and I will explain that after. So this next change, the 12 seconds to 10 seconds, it's a slight nerf, not a big deal. I don't think it will change anything. Spell cooldown floor has been removed, so this makes his Q a little stronger because that would be the most important ability. Actually, Q, I don't know if it applied to E as well. Makes it so he can use his Q immediately after the cooldown goes down due to his passive. So again, very good for Q, very good for E. His Q overload increases the duration of Arcane Mastery's supercharged effect from 3. So if you get 1 point in it, it goes to 3. And it scales up to 5 seconds. So this will be the way to go, I think, to max if you want the most from his passive. If not, I would say E max is probably best for the wave clear, but that's just me. They also increased the damage on this, so just in general, this is a much stronger spell compared to where it was before. I think E max was before, either W max depending on if you want to have AoE damage or single target damage. Now it's Q for single target damage and overall usefulness of his passive. They also normalize the cost of his mana. Not a big deal. I think this is probably better. It incentivizes you to max it as well, since you don't have the higher mana cost there. And the missile width has been increased. So overall Q is much stronger, and I think it will be the way to go unless you want the wave clear from E. Rune Prison has been nerfed. The duration is a little higher at early ranks, so it's better at 1 point and weaker at 5. So this is a pretty big nerf. 0.35 seconds at level 5. I don't think it'll be worth to max this at all anymore, especially with how the passive works. The base damage has been nerfed as well. It's already a really low base damage. Let's keep that in mind. So right now they just want it to be stronger at level 1, not so strong at level 5. So I think this makes sense, and I think Ryze is going to be in a better spot now. He isn't going to be 100% pick ban worthy, but I think he will be still really good in like a competitive setting. If actually I take that back. One of the really big weaknesses of Ryze is that he's really bad in lane swap scenarios. So I don't know how competitive teams will use him. If he can get a 1v1 lane, he'll be fine, but in competitive, he won't be as strong anymore. In solo queue, he will be just fine in my opinion, because lane swaps almost never happen. So I think that will be the case. He's in a weaker spot though, for sure, which is rightfully where he should be, because last patch was insane. Subjugate, Trundle's ultimate has been changed, and it scales up a little better throughout the game. And again, I always talk about Trundle, and I think he's a really good champion if you can fit him into a team comp, and if you have enough follow-up initiate. So what Trundle is really good at is making the enemy frontline really weak. He's just good at sapping stats. So he takes away the armor and magic resist from the front line, and the health drain is just to keep him alive. So overall, he's become so much more tanky, and his Q saps away AD from whoever he's hitting. And I think the way to go with his ultimate is often just to use it on the front line and burn them down, while separating the back line with his Pillar of Ice. But now in just this kind of game where there's so much CC and it's so hard to get to the back line, unless you have a follow-up initiate or someone else to help you get there, Trundle's very weak in that sense. I think he's really good in a 1v1 scenario, split push scenario, because he just takes away so much stats from you and gives it to himself. He doesn't even need items for that. He's really good with items, but he doesn't really need it to be very strong in that kind of scenario. So I don't think he will change too much once again. I think he will be very good in solo queue, just as a really good 1v1 split pusher. Team fights he can be good, but again, like I said, he needs a follow-up initiate, someone else to help him stick onto a target without getting kited. Another split pusher, Tryndamere, not a big change, but again, it will just make him slightly better. What this means is the Tryndamere's critical strike and attack frame increased by 16% to match with his regular basic attack frame. So his critical strike doesn't take longer than his regular attack. So I think that's fine. It just makes it all consistent. Tryndamere again is really good like solo queue in my opinion as a split pusher, but again not very good in competitive just because he gets kited. He's simply a split pusher because of that reason. Zilean got a slight buff to how he uses his double bomb combo, and I don't know if it was just me or just how they wanted to do this. I don't think it was a bug. I think it was just like a thing that they put in on purpose. I'm not 100% sure, but they make it so it's a little smoother and faster to use a double bomb combo. And what this allows Zilean to do is allow him to get the double bomb and stun very quickly. I have to see this in game just to see how it feels and try it out myself, but that's what I feel it's gonna do. It's definitely a big buff to Zilean because that's a lot of where his strength is now. He still has that really good utility from his passive, his ultimate, and his E, but his Q double bomb is just so good now. People don't understand it, but once you see it in game, and if you can get a good Zilean who can land a double bomb, he just kind of wins team fights just based off of that kind of like utility, along with his ultimate. I mean, he's really good, I think. He just doesn't provide very much damage. So that's one of the weaknesses of Zilean, and which was always a weakness of Zilean. Okay, here it is finally. Runeglaive, an item that I was looking forward to, and I actually tried out on PBE. I think it's going to be strongest on champions that can proc abilities very quickly. So like Eve with her Q, it allows her to clear the jungle very quickly, do damage, AoE damage to the enemy team. Overall, just a very good jungle item for low cooldown champions that want AP. So let's look at it. So it reduces the damage. So I'm going to compare this to, what was that one item? Magus, yeah. Magus was the older AP item. And the problem with Magus was that it was good. It was very cost efficient for what it gave you. It gave you 20% CDR and 80 AP. So very good. Almost similar to Morello's, but it doesn't have that extra mana regen. And that was the problem with it. I often would not buy it because it does not give you the mana regen to allow you to spam abilities unless you have blue buff. Like you got that 20% CDR, but you can't use those abilities as much because of how low your mana pool was. But now you get a higher mana pool, lower damage and lower CDR, so that's one really big weakness of it. But you can also get more mana as you use your auto attack. Wait, let me see. Bonus damage on hit in an area. So I know about the bonus damage on hit. Okay, and it restores 8% of your missing mana. So this is like Essence Reaver. I'm pretty sure that's the exact passive of Essence Reaver. And it allows you to sustain in the jungle, allows you to just stay out in the field. Very good. Evelynn will be really good. I think she will be a top priority pick as a jungler in competitive. I know she will be really good in the solo queue. I think Elise will be really good with this. Just champions that can use their abilities quite often and need that extra damage maybe in the jungle to clear. Overall, just I think a really good item for AP champions that don't need the tankiness of, let's say, so like with the Moo, I don't think it's like a great item because he already has a lot of AoE damage and he wants like more AP and cooldown reduction that Mage offers if you're gonna go that AP route. But like, I think the low cooldown damage focused AP junglers like Nidalee, and there was another example that I was trying to think of. They will be very strong with this. Since Cinderhulk got nerfed, this will allow more diversity. I think this will be used more often, maybe not immediately in competitive play, but I think it will be used over time as the competitive junglers like, I don't know, I'm not going to name any, but you guys know them all. They will start to use this through streams and people will catch on through that way. And it will be a very popular item. I think it's a very good item overall. Cinderhulk, I don't think this is a nerf. I looked through this and it didn't look like a nerf, it just kind of changes the way it acts. Cinderhulk now only turns on its damage aura when the champion deliberately enters combat or is attacked. So that means like if you don't want to be in combat, like if you are maybe an invisible champion, Evelynn with Cinderhulk, you're next to a minion and waiting for something to happen, like waiting for the enemy champion in mid lane to make a move. It doesn't show that it's being damaged. Things like that, or just in general, you don't want to like aggro or creep, something like that. So that's interesting. Not a big deal though. Okay, so this is what I want to talk about probably most because I think it is going to be a huge buff to tanks, especially after the nerfs to Cinderhulk. I think, I'm not sure if it's because they nerfed Cinderhulk and they want to push tanks to more a defensive route instead of that offensive damage route the Cinderhulk gave them. You get the extra health, but you also got a lot of damage with it before. The damage got nerfed, and then they're kind of buffing the defensive mastery tree. It's quite strong, and I will go through it and explain exactly what happened. Okay, so let's start with oppression, and let's open up the defensive mastery tree. And I will explain exactly what happened. Okay, so oppression was swapped with runic blessing. Runic blessing was, I'm pretty sure, right here. So if you guys can see where my mouse is, this is where runic blessing was, and it was that one mastery, you guys remember, that gave you a shield when you first spawned and each time you died. It was really bad. I don't know why they put it. Maybe every time you recalled it would be decent for jungling, something like that, but even then it would be really weak. There's a lot of ways to make it strong, but I guess they just didn't want to deal with it. They removed it. So as you see right here, it was removed. And they put repression right here. I think oppression was actually right here. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, so tenacious was swapped with oppression. So this is, it's going to be really confusing, guys. So just like, hold on. Tenacious, this one right here, which just gave you tenacity, it gave you 15% tenacity, was actually down here. So that was the last one, and it was decent, but I don't think it was worth the last. It wasn't like worthy of the last point in the defense master tree. So right now it wasn't. They changed it. So legendary guardian, I'll explain later, is a worthy like mastery for that. Oppression is the one that reduces your damage if they're under crowd control, like slows, stuns, fears, roots, things like that. It only takes 1 point. I don't think it'll be very worth it because there's a lot more strong ones here, unless you have a lot of CC maybe. But again, it removed runic blessing. It was a really bad mastery overall. Tenacious got changed to over here, so you guys remember it was over here before at the bottom. Legendary guardian, which was actually just above it right here, got switched over. It's no longer 4 points. Legendary Guardian was pretty good, but it required 4 points, which was the problem with it. So oftentimes you would want other things, and it just wouldn't be worth it for 4 points. It gave you, where was it? It gave you 4 armor and 2 magic resist per enemy champion. So that would be like 12. No wait, sorry, what am I doing? 20 armor and 10 magic resist in a full 5v5 team fight, depending on the radius. So in that sense, it was good, but it just took so many points that you wanted to put into other places. So now they moved it down 1 point, a little weaker, 3 armor and 3 magic resist, 15 armor and magic resist in a full team fight. It's quite strong. So I think this would be very worth it to go down there. They removed enchanted armor from over here. Swiftness was actually, I think this is swiftness, right? Yeah. So swiftness, swap position with enchanted armor. So swiftness used to give you a slow resistance kind of stat. And it used to be 10%, I think it was decent. I think, it was only 1 mastery point. And I think they put it like right here or something. I'm not 100% sure. I think it was right here. And if you were going up against like a lot of slows, it would be useful. They changed it to be one that's really early on. I think this will be nice. You had to choose between either enchanted armor, which was decent for 2 points, but it only went up to 5% extra armor and magic resist, which early game was really weak, so oftentimes people would go recovery. But now swiftness gives you another thing that will be actually quite useful throughout the game. 15% reduction to slows is really good for like melee champions. So I think this will be a good 2 points if you don't want the health regen. Another change that I think is really good and very strong now, along with the extra armor and magic resist, mainly the extra magic resist that you get from Legendary Guardian because it used to be only 2 magic resistance. You also get quite a lot of armor and magic resist from enchanted armor. You do have to put 4 points into it, but each point is quite strong as it is. So 10% extra armor and magic resist on these really heavy tanks, like Malphite is really good with it because he already has a percentage increase. Garen is really good with this. Just any tank in general will benefit, but those champions will like benefit even more because of how it multiplies. Along with Legendary Guardian, like I said before, and the new one, Adaptive Armor, that'll be next. So now occupies swiftness. Let's see, one moment, guys. It now occupies swiftness. So it used to be right here. This is where swiftness was, the reduction in slows. It is only 1 mastery point, very good again. Swiftness was very efficient for 1 point. And now gives you 4% of your bonus armor as magic resist if you have more bonus armor than magic resist. So like if you have more armor, you will get 4% extra magic resist. If you have more magic resist, you'll get 4% more armor. Along with Legendary Guardian and enchanted armor, all these different like armor, magic resist like points that you can get in the tree, you can really customize your mastery page as like a defensive or a melee champion to be very strong. I think tanks will be very difficult to kill with these new masteries. I'm fine with it since Cinderhulk has become more of like a defensive only kind of item, but they're going to be even stronger now. So 80 carries, like carries in general will have a harder time, but again, melee champions and tanks will be even stronger now. So we'll see. We're kind of like in this position where we don't know exactly who's going to be strong. Tanks that have been strong for some time, but they're getting nerfed, or like champions like Elise, Evelyn, who might come back because of this new Runeglaive item. So it's very tough to tell, but I think tanks will actually win out because of all the changes to this tree. It's just so powerful now. So that's at least how I feel. But you guys will see in time. It's only been like a day or two, so it's too early to tell. So again, this is probably the last change I'm going to go through. Summoner's Rift, the base turrets. So this is the inhibitor and I'm pretty sure the Nexus turrets as well. I'm not 100% sure. It doesn't say here, but now these turrets, the laser turrets, no longer slow the target and no longer reduces the target's damage. And they're saying this is so people can split push more, but I don't see like why would it matter unless like you're Udyr and you're doing that thing that you used to do before where you get like max turtle stance with like frozen heart and like blue buff and you constantly tank turret and you just take it just like that. because it doesn't reduce your damage anymore. But when you're split pushing, you're not usually tanking turrets, so this means nothing at all. But it does help to crack the base more. So if you're like a team diving and you want to just, like, this doesn't reduce the damage of the person who's diving and doesn't slow them so they can get out. Maybe it's a little safer to dive. So I think this is good. It's very hard to actually crack the base when you have these wave clear champions, along with just the strength of the laser turrets. This makes it easier. You don't need Baron buff to do it anymore. So I think this is a good change overall. Makes it a little easier to finish off games that have become quite long nowadays with the wave clear champions. So that's all I really have today, guys. Hopefully you liked it. I'm really excited for the defensive masteries. I always like when, and I think this is part of why Riot and League of Legends has been so popular for so long, is because they're constantly making these changes that make it exciting to theorycraft and try new things. And I think that's what makes it just so successful. People might think it's just simply for balance changes, but I do not think that's true. But let me know what you guys think. I think it's very interesting, and I'm excited to try it out myself. Thanks again, guys, and I'll see you guys next time.